What's going on? Welcome back to my channel. We're back with another video. And in today's video, we are going to talk about supply and demand. Very important topics. Now, supply and demand, I'm sure you've heard these terms before because you can find these terms across many different industries, right? Supply and demand are going to deal with buyers and sellers and how buyers and sellers are behaving at a particular point in the market, simply put. So when we talk about supply, we're talking about an area in the market where buyers have, in a way, overextended themselves. Buyers have reached a level of exhaustion in a supply area, and it is an area where typically sellers are going to take over. Whereas a demand area, by comparison, is going to be an area where sellers have exhausted themselves, and it's an area where buyers typically are going to take over. And if we take advantage of supply and demand, we're going to see that we are finding some key areas within the market where we can definitely capitalize and make a lot of money on. Now, no matter what the trader, no matter what his strategy is or her strategy is, I can almost guarantee you that in some way, shape, or form, it's going to involve supply and demand. Whether it's on a basic level and they're just a supply and demand breakout trader, or if they have a more complicated strategy that involves a couple of confluences, in some way, shape, or form, supply and demand is going to be within their strategy. Okay, so let's understand supply and demand today on a basic level. And if we understand these concepts on a basic level and how to recognize them on a chart, this is the first step in making sure that we are creating the foundations into becoming a great trader. Okay, so we are on the British pound versus Japanese yen chart. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to go by our definitions, right, to find the supply and demand areas, right? Let's start with supply areas that we can see in this chart. So we said a supply area is going to be an area where we're going to see some buyer exhaustion, right? And in that area, sellers are typically going to take over starting from that area. Okay, so right over here, okay, is typically what I am talking about when we talk about a supply area. Okay, now in terms of taking advantage of this move, how does a trader take advantage of this move? Well, a trader is going to take note of this move, right? Notice how price, it was once in full control by buyers, and then suddenly we see a reversal happening in this area, and then we see sellers now have control of the market. Okay, so if I'm a trader, I want to take note of this area. And not only do I want to just take a look at this area, but I want to create a zone for this entire area. So I want to use my box tool here, and I'm going to extend this zone all the way across as much as I can, especially as I see price coming to a particular area or coming up to that area where my zone was. I want to extend that box all the way across to see if price is going to enter that zone that I just drew. Okay, so as we see, price eventually got to this zone. Once price gets to my area of interest, which is this zone, right? What I want to do is see how price is behaving in this area. Okay, so my bias, just to again make us fully understand this concept, my bias should be that more than likely I'm looking for a sell in this area. Why am I looking for a sell in this area? Because in the past, previously, the market has shown me this is an area of supply, right? This is an area where buyers are no longer interested in buying up price, right? There's buyer exhaustion, and sellers will take over or have taken over previously in this area. Okay, so I'm looking for that to hold, okay? And I'm looking to see if I'm going to get that kind of seller exhaustion, right? Notice I said it's my bias, right? But it doesn't mean it's a definite, doesn't mean buyers can't completely blow past the zone and keep on going up. But because of history, right, I want to take a look at what price is doing and how it's behaving at the zone. And then as I do that, and of course there are more complicated strategies or confluences that go into making sure that you're comfortable taking the sell, because you don't want to just enter a sell. That would be a bad trade. Once your confluences do line up with your overall bias of the indication of a sell, then you are safe to enter that sell trade, and you can make a whole lot of money off this move over here. Okay, so this move over here paid out. This move over here gave out 460, actually no, gave out over 500 pips, maybe even 600 pips if you count this wick over here. And again, whether you take a piece of that or whether you're able to hold and take all of that, that is going to produce a lot of money, right? Because it's not easy to just accumulate all of those pips in a short period of time. And this was done within a week. This was a 4-day span that it gave out all these pips. Okay. So again, putting that into perspective, if I'm risking one lot, right? And let's not even talk about getting every single pip. Let's just say you held this down up until 400 pips. Let's just say, and I'm risking one lot, or in other words, $10 a pip. That is a $4,000 trade. Just one trade. You can make $4,000 off of that one trade from that one lot position. Okay. And then what you're going to do is, again, keep note of that area, right? Keep extending that area across as price continues to make its movements, right? So as price creeps up back to this area, maybe it hits an alert, right? If you set an alert in this area, it may hit an alert as it creeps up over here, and it may not. And if you miss it, you miss it. But the point is, you want to be aware of what price is doing as it gets to this area. Okay. And that's for supply. Let's look for a couple of demand zones now on this chart. Okay. All right. So on this chart, I'm looking at this area over here as an area of demand. Okay, this area over here, and I'll extend that across as much as possible. I'll extend that even more to over here. All right. This area over here is a demand zone. Okay, and again, by definition of what we mean by demand zone, an area in which where we are seeing seller exhaustion. Right. So sellers were in control of the market. They got to this area, right? There was seller exhaustion, and then buyers completely took over in this particular area. So the first instance of that happening is right over here. Okay. So right over here, we could see some seller exhaustion. We could see an abrupt movement on the buy side. And we then, after seeing this, we want to note this area and see if this area holds as a level of support. Okay. You can also think of support and resistance as a floor and a ceiling, right? Sometimes these terms are used as well. We can see that price formed a floor over here, whereas up here, if there's resistance, we would say price formed a ceiling. Okay. But price comes up, right? And as we get back to this zone, and again, we want to pay attention here, as we get back to this zone, as price hits this zone, I want to see how price is behaving as it approaches the zone. And after all my confluences and everything that's in my strategy line up with my overall bias of looking for buys. Why? Because again, we're in a buyer's zone. Then I am safe to take this buy trade. And if I take this buy trade, I can make a significant amount of pips, which will result into a significant amount of money for this trade. Okay. So obviously, we're going to look for price to come back to that zone when it does again. This time price did come back. And this is, again, this is why I mentioned we want to see how price behaves when it gets to the zone, right? Notice how price came down a little beyond the zone, right? But still wasn't strong enough to completely break past it. You don't want to just be quick and enter a trade once price hits your zone, because it can stop you out right? If you are not paying attention to see if price is actually ready to make that reversal in that zone. Okay, so when price is actually ready to make that reversal, and if your confluences do line up with that movement, then you're good to take that buy and ride that up, and other opportunities will show themselves, right? Another opportunity over here for buy, and a final opportunity as price approached the zone over here for an even bigger buy. Okay, so supply and demand, these zones are very, very powerful. Okay, and like I said, there are more complicated strategies in the market, but if you're talking about the most basic strategy, in order to make money, the most basic strategy, if you master it, if you're able to train your eyes and immediately spot supply and demand zones on the charts, you can definitely make money on it. It's definitely here in this simple strategy. This is the most simple tool you have to add to your tool belt as you are looking at the charts, as you're marking up your charts, as you're building out that strategy that's best for you. You definitely need supply and demand. The understanding of supply and demand and the recognition, right? Being able to immediately see it once you're looking at the chart is going to be key in making sure that you are making the right moves and that you are making steps towards profitability. Okay, so what I want to challenge all of you to do is go on your charts, go on any chart, right? And you want to go starting with higher time frames. Okay, so like time frames like the weekly, the daily, the 4-hour. Look for supply and demand zones, mark them out, and make sure you're taking note of each supply and demand zone and what exactly price is doing within that zone. Okay, so step one is to actually being able to identify the supply and demand zones, but we're going to also get into deeper dives in terms of how we actually capitalize on these trades in further steps, right? Because step 2, 3, 4, you can say, is actually getting into these areas on lower time frames and looking at the ways in which price is behaving within these areas. Because if we can understand how price is behaving within these areas on a smaller time frame, we lessen our risk, right? And we're able to capitalize on a bigger move with a very, very low risk. So for example, if we go to a lower time frame, okay, so now we're at a lower time frame and we're looking at these same zones that we looked at that were areas of demand where buyers took over. But now if we take a closer look at what price is doing within these areas, then we can be able to minimize our risk, right? And catch these moves much, much sooner and much, much more efficiently. Okay, so if you follow from our last video where we talked about how the market moves, what we see is a very, very simple movement, a clean movement that could have definitely aided us in capitalizing on this demand area. So my bias, just giving you perspective as me as a trader, my bias is to look for buys because I'm in this area of demand. Okay, so in its most simplest form, I want to see if the market is going to move in a clean way. And it did in this case. Okay, so what did the market do? Once the market got down to the zone, what it showed me that it did is it gave me an impulsive move up to the upside, right? And like we said before in the previous video, we're not going to just completely buy on that impulsive move, right? We want a correction first. We want to see a correction before we are comfortable taking that buy. Market gave us that correction back to the zone. Okay, this is, in other words, this is what you call a break and retest. Okay, notice how the market came and broke out of this demand zone, right? And it retested that zone. Okay, broke out of this demand zone and then it retested that zone, right? So break and retest happens. If I'm a trader, I'm looking to place my trade in this area over here. Okay, I'm looking to place my buy trade in this area over here. And if I am going to put a stop loss, right, I want to put a stop loss at the previous low. Okay, so if I'm going to put a stop loss, I'm going to put a stop loss right over here below the previous low, and that is just about 50 pips. Okay, I want to place my buy over here, and then I want to put my stop loss just about below the previous low. Okay, so we said that for buys, we are forming higher lows. I want to put my stop loss below the previous low. Why am I putting my stop loss there? Because I know that if price goes beyond this point, then my bias for the buy is completely off, right? Because it would have broken this previous low. And not only would it have broken this previous low over here, more than likely if it goes past here, right, it's looking to break this zone entirely. This entire zone is looking to be broken entirely, right? That would be an acceptable loss, right? Because I have a good bias for a buy. But again, if it goes beyond this point over here and it hits my stop loss, then I know that price was going to make a reversal anyway, okay? So this is how you take advantage of supply and demand zones. Okay, it's not, although you want to mark them up on higher time frames, because the higher the time frame, the stronger the zone is going to hold, right? And therefore, the stronger your bias could be for a buy or a sell. But you want to go down into the lower time frames, use the lower time frames to your advantage to be able to execute on that trade, right? So you can see what the market is doing on a smaller scale, right? What movements is making, and when you're actually ready to actually take that buy off of those small movements in the lower time frames. Okay, so this is going to take some time. It's going to take practice. I know when I started looking at charts and marking up and looking at supply and demand zones, I couldn't see anything, to be very honest with you. I couldn't see what my mentor was teaching me. I couldn't see what he was teaching at all. He was showing me things, but it took some time. That's just the point, that it's going to take time to train your eyes. For people who are starting in this market and have no knowledge, yeah, you're going to have to stick it through and really train yourself to start becoming accustomed to seeing these things. And it's only going to happen by practicing and practicing and practicing. If you're intermediate, right, if you're a little beyond the beginner level, then you may recognize these patterns, and you may recognize how to even draw out supply and demand and all these other things. But it's just those intricate details, like breaking things down from a higher time frame to a lower time frame, getting into the lower time frame, looking for that particular pattern that you know is profitable, letting price form that pattern, being patient enough to allow it to formulate those movements, and then when it hits your area of interest, you then execute on that buy, right? There's so much that goes into making sure you win and win consistently in these markets, right? Even beyond knowing how the charts move, being able to mark them up. Doing markups and doing supply and demand, all of these things, that's just, maybe you could say 10 to 20% of the entire thing when it comes to trading, right? The rest of it really boils down into your mental. Okay, and eventually down the line, we'll talk about psychology and how you should be going about your psychology as you are trading in the markets. But overall, I challenge you guys, work on your supply and demand, look for different areas of supply and demand on charts, go through them over and over and over, write notes, right, until you can spot them very, very easily as you're going through your charts. And let's just do it. Let's make it happen, guys. If you really want this, you got to put in the work. You got to put in the time. You're not going to cheat it. There's no get rich quick scheme over here. It's all pure work. But guess what? In the end, it is all worth it. You're looking at a career where you can literally make money wherever there's a Wi-Fi connection. As simple as that. And you can make a lot of money when you master the skill, right? It's not a matter of age. It's not a matter of, doesn't matter how old you get, is what I'm saying, right? Doesn't matter where you are in the world. As long as you have a Wi-Fi connection and you understand how the market moves, and you become profitable, right? You put in the work and you put in the time. You can't tell me that this is not all worth it, right? I'm sure you guys have seen traders make thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in a single day. This can all be possible, but you can't cheat the work. Okay, so it starts now, traders. All right, we're market masters. We have to act like it. So let's keep it going. Until the next video, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.